Hello and a warm welcome to Pulse of Culture. Poland is in the grip of space fever, all thanks to a recent first ever visit by a Polish astronaut to the ISS. But where does art fit into space exploration? A Body in Isolation, A Voice from the Future is a project that brings art and science together to explore this very question. It started at LUNARES in Poland, a former military base that now simulates life on another planet. It has since been featured as a performance at the Venice Biennale. The goal? To understand how we feel and think about space and how art can shape our ideas of life beyond Earth. To talk more about this, I am joined here today by Jan Świerkowski. Hello and welcome, delighted to have you with us. So let's begin with unpacking the project itself. So what did it entail?
It's an art and science project which includes a dialogue between artists and scientists. In this case, because it's a project about space isolation, we have put two artists in isolation in Piła, in LUNARES, and we've been trying to understand how the psychological effects of being in isolations can feed the creative process of creating a performance that then would be shown at one of the best places in the world to do it, in Venice.
And you decided to work with Nepali artists. Why?
That's true, because in December I went for a study visit to Kathmandu because I was preparing to work with the Kathmandu Triennale, and I was absolutely amazed how contemporary art is in Nepal at the moment. And I felt that at times Nepal is underrepresented at different contemporary art festivals, and I decided to invite my absolutely amazing and talented friends, Amrit Karki and Amazumi.
So what were their conclusions from this stay at LUNARES?
Well, both of them interacted very differently with isolation. Amazumi, she's a visual artist, but also a rapper. So her outcome was extremely energetic, and she felt that the isolation made her very creative. She was looking towards new rituals, and she actually felt that going to new planets, going to space, is a huge opportunity. Amrit, on the other hand, he felt more constrained, and he felt that isolation is actually about limitations, so his creative process was quite disturbed. So the outcomes of this art and science research project is very different for both of the artists.
Mm-hmm. And how does it compare with their previous projects? Because I believe that Amrit Karki did have some projects devoted, right, performances devoted to isolation.
Well, Amrit is a long-durational performer, so he works a lot with his body. He likes to focus on what he feels and uses within his art a lot of introspective methods. And actually what happened is he invited the other analog astronauts to perform with him inside of the LUNARES Research Hub, which was quite interesting because he was already not only participating in the mission, but changing the script of the mission itself. So for both of them, it was quite a creative journey, and I was super happy to guide them based on my previous experiences as an art and science curator.
And could you clarify for our viewers, who are analog astronauts?
Well, analog astronauts are people who participate in simulated space missions. And in LUNARES, what actually happens, it's not a facility that trains future astronauts. We want to learn how astronauts will behave in space when they are isolated in a group and have very difficult tasks to perform. Sometimes the dynamic of the group will change. If you push here, maybe you will have an outcome there. And so it's basically a research center dedicated to the psychology of going to space.
The Terra Nova mission, this is what Amrit took part in, was a part of the Astro-Mental Health Project. So what were the findings? You just sort of hinted at it, right?
Well, the findings are still undergoing because it's a very recent project. What LUNARES was trying to put the analog astronauts through was a situation of tension between a crew that would be joining ISS. Exactly what happened to our mission, where there were already some astronauts and 4 more were joining the mission. In a similar way, we were trying to understand what is the group dynamic there? Is there someone who's going to welcome other astronauts, and is it going to be, of course, peaceful, but maybe some tensions will arise? It's all about a group dynamic, and as we know from previous research, there can be serious obstacles when people are isolated for a long time, and very different dynamics arise.
Right, and what about those astronauts who got stuck on the ISS a while back, right?
Exactly. That's a great example of something that can happen which we can't predict. And this is exactly why we simulate this type of situations in places like LUNARES, so that the control mission doesn't go crazy, like, oh, what to do now? Based on the body of work that has been done previously, we actually know how to act and what would be the methodologies to implement in such a surprising situation that you're just mentioning.
Right, and after all this research and experiences, there was a performance at the Venice Biennale. And so what were the reactions to it?
Well, it was quite amazing. The performance was presented in the Universe Pavilion, an initiative that gathers artists, scientists, philosophers, and everyone interested in space. Well, in fact, if Stanisław Lem would be alive, I would imagine he would just have a keynote at the Universe Pavilion in Venice. Well, people were very interested, specifically because it's an art project, but also because it's an art and science project, which has a lot of work put into the scientific part. And always, I think, because it's the Architecture Biennale, we are speculating about the future. We are speculating what's going to happen. And I think this type of forward thinking is getting more and more traction within the contemporary art.
And going back to this very special venue, the Universe Pavilion, I was wondering, I mean, is space becoming more accessible to people? I mean, is it changing in some ways?
Space is becoming more inclusive, that's for sure. While still the cohort of astronauts is quite, from the 600 astronauts, it's mainly male cohort that went to space. And there's a lot of work being done to address this disproportions, also by the founders of the Universe Pavilion, who are working very strongly to send German women to space. And that is part of the discussion, how to make a space more inclusive, how to make when we will say humanity went to space, to actually mean it, not like a nation or a country went to space. We really want everyone to think about space and not to just repeat the colonial schemes that we know didn't work here on Earth.
Right, absolutely. And you've done a tremendous amount of work to make science more accessible to broader public. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, how do you gauge that recent mission, I mean, the Polish mission to the ISS?
The recent Polish mission to space with Sławomir Wisniewski on board, I think it's a great example of how we can influence new generations of future engineers and a new cohort of students who is now thinking whether to maybe become a lawyer or a teacher or a doctor. Now you can see that actually going to space is quite cool. And I think Sławomir has a huge role to play as someone who can be an idol, as someone who can be a leader. And I actually think he has a great personality to do that. And I'm very optimistic that he's going to live up to the expectations that we all have.
Right, but what about experiments themselves?
Well, regarding the experiments, in my opinion, we've gathered a lot of very interesting knowledge during that mission. But to be absolutely honest, I do believe that the most important thing is that it actually happened, that we as Poles can be proud, that we have someone who after so many years went to space, and that it's a critical moment for our space industry, that's one, and then actually to inspire the youth. I really believe that if we are able to, let's say in 10 years from now, have a couple of % more of engineers, we will be able to say of a Sławomir effect and a real impact of the mission and among our society.
Mm-hmm. And what made you choose this career? I mean, to devote your career to popularizing science through art?
Well, I've studied astrophysics in my life. That's my main. I got a master.
Very scientific.
Absolutely scientific, but at the same time extremely philosophical. Because if you go into astronomy, soon you will learn that what you're actually learning about is more about who you are and where we came from. Then, of course, a particular knowledge about stars. That is something we will all understand. But if contemporary physics and contemporary astronomy is a way of understanding astronomy far stronger than any type of philosophy that we can think of. But I still believe that somehow it's more we think that being a physicist is about equations, it's boring. Absolutely not. It's about the limitations of knowing, it's about who we are as humans and where we are going. And I think that's something that still has to be addressed, specifically in the times in which so many different theories are circulating. Like even sometimes people question whether Sławosz actually went to space. And I think this is something we all need to address and say, of course he did. He was there, and he's one of the. It's one of the wonders of physics and engineering. Yes, Sławosz Uznański went to space, and we are capable of going to Mars.
As a scientist by training, has it been challenging for you to explain some of the concepts, some of the intricacies of scientific things to artists?
Well, yes and no again. I think because I started really fast. So still when I was a student and I understood how beautiful the universe is, I invited my friends from visual arts and we started creating large-scale immersive performances. And through this, I've learned that actually artists and scientists are closer than we think. They are both extremely creative and they are very interested in investigating realities. They just do it in a different way. And because of this, I've never found art somehow contrary to science. And in all my experiences, I then found that there are actually ways of combining contemporary art, contemporary science, and I decided to do a PhD later in culture studies. And I'm hoping to introduce this new thinking in which humanities and scientists come together rather than they are some distant fields of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And are you currently working on a new project? What would you like to happen in the near future?
Well, in the near future, I would really love to focus on developing our projects that we as Institute B61 recently had in Singapore. We had a very successful exhibition in the Science Center Singapore called the Copernican Principle. And I think Singapore is an extremely interesting place, specifically to its strategic placement as the, let's say, gate to Asia. And I really think that Asia is the new, let's say, well, it's the place which is evolving at the fastest pace. And I would really love to introduce Polish art science into the Asian market.
Mm-hmm. And I must ask you about AI, of course. I mean, what is your take on that? I mean, the art that is being created by AI, for instance, mm-hmm. is it legitimate art?
In my opinion, yes. I have to say I'm not I actually even don't like the artificial in artificial intelligence because I actually think it's one of the ways that is going to make us, again, better, let's say. And in terms of how useful artificial intelligence will be in the next 10 years, I'm very optimistic. And I actually think for artists, it's a blessing rather than a curse. And in my opinion, of course, we are also discussing artificial intelligence from our perspective. But at times, again, if we look to the countries in Asia, where it's extremely hard to get, let's say, get an analysis from a doctor. And then rather than talking to no one, you can actually ask AI, look, what are those symptoms? And you get very fast a super cheap analysis, and then you can move on from that. I think we are overlooking from our Western perspective that some elements of artificial intelligence are extremely important and helpful to a lot of people all around the world.
Absolutely, as long as there's proper regulation in place, right?
I agree, yeah.
Jan Świerkowski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Pulse of Culture. Please stay tuned for more.